we find the same line, but not of sounds, but line of consciousness, you can call it, chit, in Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist perspective, where what is human being is actually imagined as a line of chittas, a line of consciousness, a temporal line. Even the speech line is a temporal line, it's not a line in space. And so the line of Chitta Santati, what is called in Buddhism, that is also a temporal line. And it is analyzed and all according to different philosophies. But this is not only specific to Buddhism and all, line of chittas. This whole idea of a line of experience, Anubhav ki ek pankti. I'm saying pankti because we are going to distinguish between this pankti and Euclid's line, which is very crucial in Navjyoti's thought. And so this line of experience becomes very central in a whole lot of analytic traditions in Indian thought. Everything ranging from knowledge or action, and any kind of purposive behavior, all these things are examined by examining the line of experience. And what it is, the way it is analyzed is in terms of this: something happens in the first moment, in the next moment something else happens, in the next moment something else happens, and then knowledge emerges, or from how action emerges, and so on and so forth. So this is the basic analytical equipment which is there of line of experience, which is there. And as I mentioned, this line of experience is not a continuous line. It's not the line of Euclid, which is there in Euclid's geometry, where between every 2 points there are other points, infinite number of points which can be found. So in Euclid's line there are no neighbors. Between any 2 points there are other points. So there's a problem if you want to sort of talk of experience in that kind of framework, because experience is characterized by a succession of experiences. We have one experience, then we have other experience, then we have some other experience, and that's how experience goes from one to the other. So here you should have neighboring elements, one experience, the next experience, or the previous experience. So Euclid's line doesn't allow for these neighboring points. And so this line, Navjyoti called it a contiguum. And apart from its basis in Indian thought, he also tried to explore like some through philosophy of Leibniz, Brentano and Whitehead, through a critical appreciation of their philosophical work. He sort of he wrote a paper on theory of experiential contiguum. And this is perhaps the reason that the difference between continuum and contiguum, that we don't see any parallel conception of line of experience in Western thought as such. I need some water. So in another very important thing along with the interpretation of this line of experience is the idea of moment. Because if all analysis is done in terms of these moments in the line of experience, so what is meant by this moment? Is it so many seconds or so many microseconds or whatever? So that has not been very clear, at least in our modern understanding. It has not been very clear. So he provided a very precise interpretation of this moment as synchronous duration, which applies to the line of experience in an exact way. And what is meant is that when we have an experience, it has a duration, it takes some time. But at the same time, each of these experiences gives us a unique content. Like we see something, that what we see is present to us synchronously, at that, entirely at that same moment. Otherwise, we will never have any clear experience at all. So we have a clear experience where all content is given at the same time, at the same instant. But at the same time, this experience is in a duration. So he called this complex synchronous duration. And this is conceptually the moment in terms of which the line of experience is analyzed. So in each moment, certain experience is presented, which also has a certain duration. And this idea of moment is actually there in our usage also, and normal usage. When we say that the moment of confrontation has arrived, we are not referring to that 10:35 now the confrontation will take place. But we are referring that confrontation, which is one content, which will now can occur any time. So this moment of history, moment of confrontation, moment of insight, all these things, all this usage actually get some kind of rigor if we think of moment in this way. So, so through this moment and this line of experience, he explored it in various analytic traditions of India. And the next step that he was simultaneously very deeply studying Western philosophy also. He made a very in-depth study of the notion of form in Western philosophy, starting from the ancient Greeks to our contemporary times, where we have Plato's form and so on, and Aristotle's form, and but even the contemporary Western thought, there are two very important forms, like one is proposition and one is set. So according to him, all the essentialist claims in the West are articulated in terms of proposition form, and all the constructivist claims in the West are articulated in terms of the set form. So, but he also developed a critique of this idea of form, and he sees because he sees this was the imagination of form as enclosure. It's something closed within which the content is there. Form is like form and content, that distinction is always there. So this imagination of Plato's and subsequent even set and proposition is like an enclosure where, like in the case of proposition, subject and predicate can find its place, and or in the case of set, the various members of the set can be there. So when he started looking for where this form as enclosure started, and he found that in Anaximandros, a pre-Socratic thinker, has this idea of apeiron, which is like infinite or disordered or chaotic. Apeiron and peiron. There was a difference which was made in Alexandros, which is between apeiron, which is the aparimit, which he compared with aparimit, which is there in Rig Veda, and parimit, which is like enclosed. So the way Greek thought developed is they, in a sense, abandoned this apeiron in that. And in fact, he marks the difference which emerges between the Greek tradition and the Indian tradition in this abandoning of apeiron. So after this study of form, he kind of generalized the idea of form. So the form is not just Plato's forms or form as enclosure, but something much more general. And he found that there are certain, in Indian thought, there are certain fundamental elements which can be articulated as forms. So he articulates it in this, in the connection with the idea of universal verb. So, Samanya Kriya. So there has been an ancient search for something called universal verb, which can remove ambiguity when we use language about reality. Like,